Welcome back, folks, to the first Archetype review of 2022. I'm Frizz, and today we're going to be talking about an archetype that is all about armor and defense, the Sentinel. Sentinels are going to be better with their armor than basically any other character in the entire game, and they can make the most out of it like pretty much nobody else. It also has one of the best dedications out of any archetype in the entire game system, and the rest of the feats are no slouch either. Without any further waffling around, let's just jump right into things. The Sentinel Dedication is good for basically every single class in the game except for monks. It gives proficiency with light and medium armor, and if you were already trained in both light and medium armor, you then become trained in heavy armor. This is already fantastic since most martial classes are going to be trained in light and medium armor, and most classes have an option to get there. For example, if you're a rogue, if you're a ruffian, then you can qualify to get heavy armor proficiency with a single dedication, which is fantastic. Generally, heavy armor is going to be better than light and medium armor, and light and medium armor is going to be better than wearing no armor at all. So it's taking a Sentinel dedication and getting new armor proficiency is almost always going to be better for your AC. It's also just fantastic for spellcasters, because wearing any armor is better than wearing no armor. You're going to have a lot better defenses. If that wasn't good enough, then armor proficiencies that are granted by this feat also scale with your level. If you get a class feature that improves your light armor or medium armor proficiency beyond trained, then your proficiency granted by this feat increases as well. Notably, this doesn't increase whenever your unarmed defense increases, but if you do hit level 13 and you have a class feature that grants expert proficiency with light armor, then your armor proficiency from this feat increases to expert as well. Basically, the armor that you get from this feat will be just about as good as your normal armor, and your AC won't be completely left behind even if you are a spellcaster. The one issue that I do have with this feat, which is a pretty minor one, is that for classes like Champion and Fighter, which are already trained in heavy armor, this dedication does literally nothing, outside of allowing you to take further Sentinel feats. I'm not a fan of there being a feat that you have to take to get other feats that gives you literally nothing. So I'd personally house rule it that you get some fairly minor benefit for taking this feat. As an example, it could just be like, you're able to put on medium and heavy armor in half the time. Or you can put them on in only a minute, which isn't a huge benefit, but it might be helpful. And it is at least a scrap of something useful for taking a feat. Just taking a feat and then not getting any benefit from it just leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. So, it's up to you if you want to implement that. It's certainly not rules as written, but it's ruled as fun, which I think is probably a little bit better for a game. Steel Skin is a great level 4 skill feat that is only accessible to the Sentinel, and it requires that you are trained in survival, but it makes you a lot better at being ambushed. Not that it actually makes you less likely to be ambushed, but it makes you much more likely to be prepared to be ambushed. Normally, you cannot rest in your armor, since if it doesn't have the comfort trait and you're resting, then you're going to wake up fatigued. And since the only way to get rid of fatigued is to rest for 8 hours, you really don't want to rest in your armor. Steel Skin means that you can sleep normally while wearing medium armor. And once you become a master in heavy armor, then you can also sleep normally in heavy armor. The earliest that you can become a master in heavy armor is at level 13 for a champion. And the next most early is as a fighter at level 17. So you're not going to be sleeping in full plate for a while yet, but for basically everyone else, carrying around a set of medium armor to sleep in is pretty great. At level 6, Armor Specialist is another amazing archetype skill feat that really will help you out. If you aren't a class that already gets access to armor specialization effects, because there are some of those that get them, like Fighter and Champion. For those who haven't watched my most recent video on armor, then armor specialization effects generally give you resistance to a particular type of damage, and the type of damage depends on what armor group your armor belongs to. I'm just going to be summing them up here because I went into detail about them in the last video, but basically chainmail reduces damage from critical hits, while composite, leather, and plate armor reduces damage from piercing, bludgeoning, and slashing attacks, respectively. Armor specialization is genuinely incredible, And if you don't have access to it normally from your class, then getting it for the low price of a single skill feat is amazing, and I cannot understate how useful this is. Getting damage resistance to very common damage types is incredible. Level 8, Armored Rebuff is the only offensive ability that you get with this archetype. It's a really fun reaction that works great with the flavor of making an armored juggernaut who doesn't care remotely about people attacking him. You get better at throwing around your weight whenever you're in armor, and you can now capitalize on foes' mistakes to push them around. As a reaction, whenever someone critically fails a melee attack against you with either a weapon or an unarmed strike, you can attempt to shove them as a reaction, even if your hands aren't free. If you succeed, then it does work a little bit differently than a normal shove though, since normally with a shove, you can follow the person that you push, but with Armored Rebuff, you cannot follow them, because you're shoving them by the sheer knockback of them hitting you, and basically, they hit something very hard, so they stumble back. You're not actually shoving into them, it's more like they're hitting you, and then because of an equal and opposite reaction, they get pushed back, which is a little bit weird, but it basically means that they will have to spend another action to approach you, which is fantastic because reducing actions is legitimately the best strategy in the entire game. Also, it's just fun to be an immovable object, and no one else is an unstoppable force, which is just a fun way to play a character. Mighty Bulwark improves the already incredible Bulwark trait found on full plate and Hell Knight armor, and it is incredible. If you haven't watched my armor video, then I still suggest that you watch it, but Bulwark allows for you to replace your dexterity modifier on damaging reflex saves with a +3 modifier, which is almost certainly going to be higher for anyone that is wearing full plate, since full plate, you literally don't have to have a dexterity modifier to affect your AC, so if you're planning on wearing heavy armor, you probably don't have a good dexterity. So Bulwark can really save you. Mighty Bulwark makes this even better, increasing the bonus to a +4 and allowing the bonus to trigger for all of your reflex saves, not just the damaging ones. This is really great since it's basically a +1 to all reflex saves. And who doesn't love some better defensive abilities? It's certainly not going to be someone who is taking a super defensive archetype. Also, I'm just going to point it out here that the ability to get this bonus on all reflex saves is nice, but about 95% of reflex saves are going to be damaging already. So it's not going to be that likely that you're going to be running into a reflex save that is not damaging. Sacrifice armor is a super risky reaction that can save your life in a critical situation, but it leaves you open for further follow-up attacks. As a reaction, whenever you would be hit by a physical attack, you can let your armor take a bunch of the damage instead of you. You now reduce the damage that you take by double your armor's level, and your armor now becomes broken. If it was already damaged, then it is immediately destroyed. Now, obviously, destroying armor is really bad, since armor is generally very pricey once you start putting runes on it. But how bad is the broken condition? Because obviously destroyed is bad, but how bad's broken? Well, it's pretty awful, for armor especially. It still gives you its normal bonus to AC, but wearing broken armor also gives a status penalty to your AC because the armor is literally broken. It's a -1 status penalty for light armor, a -2 for medium armor, and a -3 for heavy armor. Obviously, this is a pretty horrible place to be in, because a -3 to your AC means that you are going to be very likely to get crit. So, trying to avoid using this for minor blows is really important, because genuinely, wearing broken armor is going to get you killed, so you want to use this in a climactic moment. Although, of course, wearing broken armor is better than being down on the ground and dying. So, it's always nice to use, and it can always be fixed with the repair exploration activity. I'm also just going to point out here that the level of your armor is actually based on the highest level rune on your armor, so keep that in mind and just keep track of what the highest level rune is. Greater Interpose is a great improvement to the Sacrifice Armor reaction. Now, Sacrifice Armor can be used whenever you get damaged by any attack, not just physical damage, and you can also use it to reduce damage taken from a failed or just a reflex save where you took damage. Additionally, if you use Sacrifice Armor whenever you get critically hit, or whenever you get damage from a critically failing a reflex save, and where you would take double damage, you now take the normal amount of damage from that attack or reflex save as normal. Basically, you can now use Sacrifice Armor as a reaction to negate critical hits, which is a much, much bigger deal than the normal damage reduction. And you still get the normal damage reduction. Critical hits are incredibly deadly, and being able to negate them can legitimately save your character's life. Overall, I'm a fan of the Sentinel, even if I wish it had a bit more to offer for classes that already have access to heavy armor and armor specialization. For everyone else though, except for monks of course, it's a godsend. I honestly feel like this is one of the most popular dedications in the entire game, and it's great for pretty much every single character. Having either access to armor or access to heavy armor is a legitimately big deal in keeping your character alive. So, if you just want to represent a character knowing how to use armor, or coming from a family of blacksmiths or soldiers, then this is a great pickup just to have a little bit of survivability, even if you don't take the further feats in the archetype. No matter how defensive a character gets, they will still always get hit. But at least with the Sentinel, you'll have a bit more options. Thanks for watching this video, and welcome to 2022. Let's hope that this one is a little bit better than last year. This has been a pretty interesting video for me to make, since I generally don't make characters that are focused around defense, and I don't actually think that I've made a character in 2E yet that uses anything but light armor, or unarmored defense, so I hope that I haven't made any mistakes about armor, and if I have, then let me know. I'm always looking for more criticism or ideas on improvement. I'm always trying to get better. I've got a video coming out next week that goes over all the different runes that you can put on your armor, so if you'd like to see that, then liking, commenting, and subscribing down below are the best ways to see it. So that will tell YouTube that, you are actually interested in my content and that you'd like to see more of it. It'll also tell other people that they should watch it, which is of course always going to be a benefit. So if you'd like to do me a favor, then liking, subscribing, or commenting down below would be wonderful. Until I see you next, live a wonderful life.